compare sexual and asexual reproduction, which one do you think is better?
Asexual reproduction.
Why? Why is it better?
Because it is less complicated.
Yes, see, asexual reproduction, even though it is less complicated, but if you think about it in terms of evolution, in terms of genetics and everything, sexual reproduction will be much like better. Why? Because it generates the variation. It brings about new characters, which is not found in asexual reproduction. Okay, but again, asexual reproduction, this happens in the lower organisms, not in the higher organisms. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Apart from that, the sexual reproduction takes place in the higher organism. It takes more time, but it is, you can say, a better method. But talking about the advantages of asexual reproduction, so it takes less time. It is less complicated because we saw that the gametes are not formed. The gametes don't fuse. So because of this gamete thing is absent, it is less complicated. It preserves the parental characters, meaning the characters that are found in the parent. The same exact thing are found in the offspring. Because the offsprings here, they are the clones, meaning the exact copies of the parents, right? So it preserves, like the parental character is preserved when we talk about the asexual reproduction. Any doubts?
No.
So this was asexual reproduction. Now coming on to the sexual reproduction. So we know that sexual reproduction, the first thing that will be present in it will be the gametes. The gametes will be formed, the gametes will fuse, and everything related to that will happen. Now, when we talk about the sexual reproduction, firstly, let's talk about in flowering plants. Now, why? The question comes along that why only flowering plants? Why not any other plant? See, in the case of flowering plants, sexual reproduction is very prominently present. And also remember one thing, flowers. Okay, the flowers, that they look beautiful to us, but it's like so much more than beauty. The flowers, they contain the reproductive structures of the plant. Whether it is the male part or the female part, it is contained by the flower. So the flower, they contain the reproductive structure of the plants. Clear? Apart from that, talking about what are the parts of the flower. So if you see here, I think I have a picture somewhere. Okay, look, this is like a typical picture of a flower, and you see how different structures are labeled here. Okay, now if you see on the left hand side, there is stamen, which consists of the anther and the filament. And then there is carpel or pistil, which consists of the stigma, style, and ovary, the three things. So this stamen is the male reproductive part, and this pistil or carpel is the female reproductive part of the flower. Other than that, you can also see the petals and the sepals. The sepals are protective in nature. The petals are colorful structures present in a flower so that it can attract the insects. Now, talking about the parts of a flower, see, in a general basis, gynoecium and androecium are the male and the female reproductive parts. But when we talk about the gynoecium, we can't study the whole group. So we take out one part of it. And that one unit or one part of the gynoecium is called as the pistil or the carpel. Now, this carpel or the pistil, this is the female reproductive part, whereas the one part of androecium is called as the stamen, and that is the male reproductive part. So these are the two most important components of the flower, that is androecium and gynoecium. Now, furthermore, when we talk about apart from the androecium and gynoecium, there is petals and sepals, and these are not the main reproductive parts. Rather, they are the accessory parts of the flower. Clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Now moving forward, talking about the sexuality of a flower, whether the flower contains the male or the female or both. So depending upon that, if a flower either has pistil, like in one flower only pistils are present, or in one flower only stamens are present. So those kind of flowers are called as unisexual flowers. Uni means one, sexual refers to the sex, like the male or the female sex parts. Then, when we talk about bisexual, bi means two. So here, both the male and the female reproductive parts will be present in one flower, and that is called as bisexual flower. So the example for unisexual flower, we have papaya and watermelon. And the example for a bisexual flower, we have the hibiscus and mustard. Any doubts up until now?
No, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Now let us study the male reproductive part in depth. So when we talk about the male reproductive part of the flower, so this is the one that produces the male gametes. And when we talk about what is the male gamete of the flower, so it is pollen grain. Pollen grain is the male gamete. And these pollen grains, they are found or they are present or they are formed, like they are made or synthesized inside the anther. So one stamen is made up of two parts, anther and filament. So inside the anther, the pollen grains are made, and then the filament is like a structure which is attaching the anther to the flower. Now the pollen grains, they are yellowish in color and they are very sticky in nature. This much is clear?
Okay, ma'am.
After that, there is the pistil. Pistil or carpel. Okay, if you write pistil in exam, that is also correct. If you write carpel, that is also correct. So female reproductive part is the pistil or the carpel. And these, like the pistil or the carpel, they are made up of three parts: stigma, style, and ovary. Now, stigma, this is like the base. It is like the landing platform. So whenever the pollen grains will be released, they will come and land on the stigma. Apart from that, there is the style. Now, style is the portion that will be sort of like a column. It will be connecting the stigma to the ovary. And lastly, there's the ovary, which is the basal part at the base. It's like bulgy, it's swollen. Now, usually in a flower, the female reproductive part will be present at the center and it will be surrounded by the male reproductive parts if it is a bisexual flower. When we talk about the ovary, so this is, like I said, it is the basal part which is bulgy or swollen. And inside the ovary, ovules are present, and the ovule contains the egg cell, and obviously the egg cell will be the female gamete. Any doubts up until now?
No.
Now, the male gamete is formed, the female gamete is formed. But in order to proceed the sexual reproduction, the male gamete has to fuse with the female gamete. So for that, what should happen? The male gamete has to be transferred. It has to be brought about near the female gamete, and that is the transferring. And this transfer process is called as pollination. So because of pollination, the pollen grains will be transferred to the stigma so that it can go and fuse with it. Now, talking about the pollination, it is of two types: self-pollination, cross-pollination. Now, self-pollination is the one in which the pollen grains are being transferred from the male, like from the anther to the stigma of the same plant or a same flower. So that is self-pollination. But when it is being transferred to a different flower or to a different plant, then that is cross-pollination. Okay.
Okay.
Now tell me, self-pollination will take place in which kind of flowers? Self-pollination will take place in which kind of flowers?
Roses.
Hmm?
Like flowers in the sense, you mean?
Like answer in terms of sexuality of the flower. Will take place in which kind of flowers? Like unisexual or bisexual?
Bisexual, unisexual.
Unisexual. How? Like in self-pollination, the pollen grains, they get transferred from the stigma to the from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or the same plant. So if the flower will be unisexual, so it will have either the male or the female part. So in the case of self-pollination, mostly it takes place in bisexual plants. Okay.
Okay.
And talking about cross-pollination, it can take place in bisexual also and mostly in unisexual. So that is the case. Now moving forward, how does this transfer take place? Nowhere we have read that the pollen grains have wings, right? So in order for this transferring to be taking place, the pollen grains are transferred with the help of certain agents, and those agents are called as pollinators. So pollinators, these are the ones that cause the pollination. They bring about the pollination. And the pollinators, they are of two types, abiotic and biotic pollinators. Abiotic means non-living. Biotic means living. Examples like wind and water. These are non-living things, but they can cause the pollination. So we call them as the abiotic pollinators. Then there are animals, particularly insects like honeybees. So they are living organisms, and these are also great pollinators because when they sit from like one flower to another flower, they transfer the pollen. So we call them as the biotic pollinators. Any doubts?
No.
Okay. Now you note down these things till here, like the sexual reproduction in flowering plants, and then we'll move forward. Done till here? Yes, Zunairah, are you done till here?
I'm drawing the diagram, ma'am.
Okay, okay. See, once you're done, please inform me, okay, so that I can scroll it for you.
Yes, okay. Yes, ma'am, you can scroll. Ma'am, you can scroll. Ma'am, finished. Ma'am, finished. Ma'am, finished. Ma'am, finished.
All right. Any doubts up until now?
No.
Okay. So now see, after the pollen grain lands on the stigma, so there is a phenomena called as pollen tube germination that takes place. Basically, from the pollen grain, a tube-like structure is formed, which is called as a pollen tube. Now, why is this formed? This is formed so as to deliver the two male gametes to the egg cell inside the ovule. So as soon as the pollen grain will be landing on the stigma, the pollen tube germination takes place. Okay. And then the male gametes travel to the female gametes. And then the male gamete fuses with the female gamete, ultimately leading to the formation of zygote, which is diploid. Now see, do you know the difference between haploid and diploid?
No, ma'am.
See, haploid means anything that has one set of chromosomes. Diploid means two sets of chromosomes. So when we talk about the gametes, whether it is the male gamete or whether it is the female gamete, they each have one set of chromosomes. And when the male gamete plus female gamete, haploid for the male and haploid for the female, they fuse together. So N plus N, 2N. So we have diploid zygote. Clear?
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so now after the zygote has been formed, now the zygote they start divide to form the embryo. Now in the embryo, basically the ovule, first of all, the ovule that we saw, which was present inside the ovary, this ovule will turn into a seed. So it will start maturing, it will become a seed, and the ovary becomes the fruit. And we know that since the seeds are present inside the fruit, so just like that, ovules are present inside the ovary, and the ovule matures into the seed, whereas the ovary matures into the fruit. Now, after this whole entire thing is done, then the petals, the sepals, the stamen, and the style, all of these structures, they fall off. And this is one reproductive cycle that is completed. Now we know that the basis of farming or the basis of agriculture is the seed, right? So there is this phenomena called as the seed germination. So what is it? It's like from the seed, when the seedling develops, which is like a tiny, tiny plant or a new plant that develops from the seed. And this will happen or this will take place under the perfect sets of conditions, like the temperature should be appropriate, the pH should be appropriate, all the nutrients must be available, and also water must be available. And then the seed germination will take place. Now inside a seed, you see there are cotyledons present. When one cotyledon is present, we call it as a monocot seed or monocotyledonous seed. When two cotyledons are present, we call it as dicot or dicotyledonous. Now, there are two more structures that you should know, radicle and plumule. Now, the radicle, it gives rise to the root. The plumule gives rise to the shoot. To remember this, remember it like that R for root, R for radicle. So, radicle gives rise to the root. And what is left with? That is the plumule. It will give rise to the shoot or the sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Any doubts?
Okay, ma'am. No doubts.
All right. Now you can note down the rest of it.
You can scroll now.